The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, March 20th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Trump to Ohio as his trade policy threatens to slaughter the Rust Belt. Meanwhile, the Electoral College is not going away, but it is on the table. And in Florida, Andrew Gillum starts a massive voter drive while Florida Republicans trying to undermine the voter enfranchising constitutional amendment passed there. Meanwhile, Trump's North Korea negotiation team is falling apart. And the White House now admits that the Republican tax cuts failed, but for the make the millionaires richer part. Europe fines Google $1.5 billion. And white-collar prosecutions hit historic lows. Good news! Means that they finally learned their lesson and they're not committing any more crimes.
We're just going to take our money and just go away.
Joe Biden ready to jump into the race as the front runner. We'll see how long that lasts. And the Trump administration repeated law-breaking, stymied by their sheer incompetence and the courts. For now, at least. All that and more. On today's program, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It is Wednesday. Thank you for joining us. Going over some news stories. The 2020 race is heating up. It has some pretty big implications, not the least of which I want to start with just a piece that Matt Iglesias wrote, actually, that discusses the sort of the demobilization that seems to have taken place with the resistance, as it were. And it can be seen in the context of this emergency order to build the wall. No calls for phone calls. No protests. Nothing like what we saw with the Kavanaugh hearings. Nothing like what we saw with any number of fights leading up to the 2018 election. Now, part of this is a function of just you're leading up to the 2018 elections, and the close proximity of elections gets people's heart rate going a little bit. And then, of course, winning in such a grand fashion in 2018, although, you've won a battle, not necessarily a war, also tends to demobilize people. There's multiple theories as to what's going on. You didn't see Democrats attempt to mobilize people around H.R. 1. Maybe part of the theory is that you're not going to pass it in the Senate. But the idea of getting people, and this will tie into Elizabeth Warren's call to get rid of the Electoral College as well. There is value in raising issues and in fighting for issues that you know are not going to win anytime in the near future, or maybe ever. and attempting to generate grassroots action around a political reform bill. I mean, you talk about restoring the Voting Rights Act. You talk about motor voter registration. You talk about giving a federal holiday for federal workers on Election Day. You talk about providing some measure of uniformity to the voting process across state to state to state. You talk about adding the disclose bill to try and get some measure of accountability when it comes to political contributions, matching funds. I think it was 6-1 matching funds for running for Congress, and then ethics reforms, stuff that you would think should be illegal already. Like, you can't sit on a committee that you have holdings in the company that is affected by that, or
But
you can't
then
use
you know
insider
better things about the company.
Right.
You know better.
So-called business acumen.
It's called acumen.
But the idea, I mean, and it's, at first, certainly in retrospect, I acknowledged that this was happening. Of course, there was a lot more attention paid to Ilhan Omar and within even the Democratic circles than trying to generate some type of grassroots action, even if it is to promote a bill that can never pass and won't even be brought up in the Senate. You put pressure on Mitch McConnell. Why are you not doing that? And there's a couple of different theories as to why this demobilization has taken place. One is that there's a fear amongst the leadership of the Democratic Party that this type of mobilization will lead to relentless calls for impeachment, which they fear from a political standpoint, I guess, which, again, I have, there's reason to not impeach on just sort of practical grounds, but that should not in any way dampen the I guess the impetus behind it from a political standpoint. There's also the fact that it's not as clear. Once you've won the House, you don't have the same dynamic to generate people. And then all of this energy now, where you had the candidates, the would-be candidates who all knew they were running a year ago, were running on and were promoting issues and were trying to get out in front of issues. They're doing that now to a certain extent, but they're also basically trying to run for president. And so you've got, what are we at, 12 now? People fighting Trump in Washington, he says, aren't asking for grassroots help. There's a small army of Democrats roaming Iowa and the early primary states who are asking for grassroots help to fight each other, which is true. I mean, all these dynamics are at play right now, and it is somewhat problematic. I'm not sure what the solution is, but it is an interesting phenomenon to watch and see if that changes. Now, of course, this is early in the new Congress, and we're just starting to ramp up hearings. But you've already seen the Democrats seem to sort of back off a little bit off of getting taxes, Donald Trump's taxes. Maybe they're waiting to do this next year. I don't know. They're all waiting for the Mueller report to drop. We get new notices every couple of days that it's going to drop within days, and then there's a punt. So there's this sort of like state of stasis. And, we're going to be talking more, at the same time, like I feel the same pull. We're going to talk about Elizabeth Warren and Beto O'Rourke today. And because that's out there. That's what people are thinking about and probably should be. So it's a bit of a dilemma. But we'll keep an eye on it and see if we see Democrats or affiliated groups, we should say on the left, more institutional groups, attempt to reinvigorate this sense of at least activism and getting people mobilized in some fashion. It's also really hard to do for 4 years straight without a break, particularly after everybody, is coming out of the last November. There is a point where it's like, all right, we haven't won the championship, as it were. We're still in the playoffs,
it's the
right?
All-Star break.
Right. Yeah. But the break's getting a little long.
Nah, we're still icing up.
Anecdotally speaking, that's absolutely true. I didn't even think about it until just now, but I think the last big action that the DSA did that we saw a lot of other people and groups at as well was the Kavanaugh protests. But we're still doing stuff, and everyone is, as always, welcome to join. You don't have to be a socialist to demonstrate against the Trump administration.
I mean, early on, we saw, some protesting around the Green New Deal, but it wasn't necessarily a full-on mobilization. But we'll see. Folks, as you know, you spend a third of your life in sheets. And it's about time for a betting upgrade. Brooklinen named the winner of the best online betting category by Good Housekeeping. Brooklinen has more than 35,000 five-star reviews. Wow. That's because, these I have now, I think, 3-4 sets of Brooklinen sheets. It's because by eliminating the middleman and working directly with manufacturers and customers, Brooklinen offers luxury sheets without the luxury markup. And with over 25 colors and patterns, these sheets don't just feel great, they look great too. You've heard me, you know what I didn't realize is that Brooklinen, maybe I did, or I just I wasn't sure, but they're a Brooklyn company. They're in Brooklyn. Is that obvious? I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I have, I go for they have basically two types of sheets. The more, I guess, luxurious feeling or the cool, crisp feeling. I go for the cool, crisp. I think that's pretty obvious. People would know that quite a bit.
And crisp.
Exactly. And, the thing in my experience, as someone who keeps things for a long time, and I don't want to expand on that too much, but I'm not someone it's rare you can ever see me wear something that you can't go back and look at a video 8 years ago and I have the same shirt. But quality sheets last for a long time. And these are quality sheets. They feel good and they look good, and I know they're going to last me. I've had my Brooklinen sheets, at least the ones I'm thinking about specifically, the stripes, which I don't think they make anymore. The type of stripe, sort of like my shirt, actually. Almost identical to my shirt. I guess I don't really have a wide range of genre that I enjoy too, but they look as good as they did when I got them over a year and a half ago, I think. My Brooklinen sheets are the best. And like I say, the most comfortable I've ever slept on. Now it's time for your upgrade. Brooklinen.com has an exclusive offer for just my listeners. Get 10% off your first order and free shipping when you use the promo code MAJORITY at brooklinen.com. Brooklinen is so confident in their product that all their sheets, comforters, and towels come with a lifetime warranty. The only way to get 10% off your first order and free shipping is to use the promo code MAJORITY at brooklinen.com. That's Brooklinen, BROOKLINEN.com, promo code MAJORITY. Brooklinen, these really are the best sheets ever. And once again, today's episode of The Majority Report is supported by Pitchfork Economics with Nick Hanauer. It's a weekly podcast that explores why everything you learned in Econ 101 was wrong, and why if we don't get economics right, the pitchforks are coming. Every week on Pitchfork Economics, zillionaire investor Nick Hanauer is joined by some of the world's most original economic thinkers in a convention-busting exploration of who gets what and why in the American economy. Pitchfork Economics explains why a $15 minimum wage is actually good for business, why taxing the rich spurs economic growth, and why a thriving middle class is the primary cause of prosperity. Senator Cory Booker explains why curbing corporate greed would actually be good for corporations and the economy. Historian Yuval Harari explains how those in power use storytelling to shrink your paycheck. And economist Stephanie Kelton scolds Democrats for worrying too much about how we're going to pay for things, not enough about what we need to do. If you want to learn how to make the economy work for all Americans and not just the wealthy few, subscribe to Pitchfork Economics at pitchforkeconomics.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Nick Hanauer, been a guest on this program. So has too Stephanie Kelton. Maybe we've had Yuval Harari. It sounds like a good show.
Sapiens. I don't think we ever quite got him.
I don't think we got there.
But he's an interesting guy.
All right, so let's do we have the Katie Pavlich video? Let's just put that up as a little, and then I want to go into some Beto O'Rourke stuff, because there's been a couple of good pieces about Beto O'Rourke, and of course he is coming off of his big fundraising victory, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Katie Pavlich, apparently, is she now on Fox on a more regular basis now?
She seems like the 5 regular contributor.
Oh, she a 5 regular contributor now?
She's the 6th of the 5.
Now, wasn't she didn't she formally go out with that guy, Brandon Darby, who was the FBI informant in some protests and was running around, I think, Occupy as well, if I remember correctly. Now, we're getting way back here, but
it looks like you're right. So, yeah.
There you go. I still got it, folks. Here is Katie Pavlich.
I didn't know Brooklyn was in Brooklyn. I'm a little tired, and then all of a sudden, chalk it.
So Katie Pavlich coming on, bringing the completely fact and historical free assessment. I mean, fact and historical free conclusions and what would you call this? Assertions about facts and history.
They keep blaming America for the sin of slavery, but the truth is throughout
human
history...
We should also say, and let's go back, she's talking about reparations. Now, it's my opinion that reparations actually should not just be for slavery, but for the continued racism practiced by the U.S. government through, just like an official policy through the middle of the 20th century in terms of preventing the accumulation of wealth within the black community. But here is Katie Pavlich with her fact and historical and factual assertion.
They keep blaming America for the sin of slavery, but the truth is throughout human history, slavery has existed, and America came along as the first country to end it within 150 years. And we get no credit for that to move forward and try and make good on that.
We did have a very bloody civil war.
We're over that
and
issue.
We also, and the remnants
are a long time.
The racial history,
and
the remnants of the Civil War, particularly blacks in the South.
Correct.
Yes.
That was not an easy path. I mean, that was bloody and violent and deadly.
And there were Native Americans here when we showed up.
Yeah, we're still. My point is that we were the country that decided to end it, and we're still dealing with the issue. But if you want to start a problem and to inflame racial tension even more, start blaming people who have nothing to do with slavery for the sin of slavery. That is not fair. That's not the American way, and we shouldn't be doing it.
Okay. You're welcome. Also, I'm sorry, being a little bit pedantic here, but maybe usefully, there was a place called Haiti.
Well,
happened before.
Or Britain.
Or
Britain.
Or Spain.
Or Spain.
Or Sweden. Yeah. And apparently the Netherlands. And Denmark. And France. Portugal. And we should also say that when the United States apparently, which was founded on this notion of ending slavery, right? Like we came along and decided to end it. That's one of the reasons why we were here.
We were going to be named the United States of Slavery Enders.
Exactly. And we're just like, and we'll do that. We will get to that in 100 or so years. And by ending slavery, what we mean is ending slavery by non-prison folk. Because, of course, we still allow for prison slavery. And this notion that somehow reparations are punishment for people who had nothing to do with slavery. No, what it is the fact is that we all, on some level as a society, benefit from slavery, continuing to benefit today. Whether it's, across the income spectrum on some level, or wealth spectrum, but obviously far more so for those who have had great success, we're all continuing to benefit. All of the great exceptionalism of the United States was built on an enormous amount of free labor, and all of the wealth that exists within the white society is at least in part a function of having less people to compete against who live in society. They will contribute to the building of that wealth, but they will not share in the building of that wealth. Things like redlining, things like not providing secondary mortgages. These are all governmental policies. Things like not allowing them to have political power for the greater part of our history as a country. So it's not a question of punishing anybody. It is a question of trying to make up for that deficit, which of course also exists not just as a function of cash, but of just a deficit that's been created in terms of just a way of seeing the world. I mean, we spoke to, I guess we played that interview over the break, but it was Deep Roots. And I can't remember who one of the authors were. Matthew Blackwell. But the research that they have done shows that you can track, to this day, the racism of white people on a county by county level and track it directly to the number of slaves relative to white people who lived in a given county hundreds of years ago. And so if you can track the attitudes of white people based upon the ratio of slaves to white people in a given county hundreds of years ago, and you can see it play out, there must have been an impact that has equal resonance amongst ancestors of those slaves, of descendants of those slaves, and upon the community, broadly speaking. We can't track it in the same way because they were completely denied any type of political power for much of those years. So you can't see how it plays out in the context of society. But that's just a function of how little political power they had. So Katie Pavlich, for everything she said in that segment.
She should go try a fast food sandwich.
She was talking as if nothing she was saying could be checked easily. Like,
I mean, even including by some former VJ libertarian who managed to at least retrieve the Civil War.
Yeah, exactly.
It was slightly important. I mean, we went really unfair. We talked about Sweden and Haiti and Portugal and Britain, but you could also even just go like, that thing in our country that there's been a Spielberg movie about?
Right.
It's called The Civil War.
And when you contemplate how slavery was abolished basically through the 1800s, all those countries we mentioned before the United States, it wasn't even as if it was just those countries. We were like, maybe we should get on board with this. It was also like, maybe we should get on board with this, and it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of lives to get it through.
Well, and also if you read documents of anyone in America at the time, it's a very they're very conscious of, like, Britain makes fun of us for still having slaves in like the 1820s and 30s. Like this is a known thing that we were behind on this.
Well, you have your facts, Matt, and Katie Pavlich has hers. All right, so let's dig into Beto. As you know, Beto has come out of the gate with, he tells reporters he had more than 128,000 unique contributions in the first 24 hours of the campaign. The average donation size was $47. I don't want to get nitpicky about this because I think it's sort of silly anyways. The fact is he raised $6 million. Those are real dollars. It's just a little weird that they're talking about unique contributions as opposed to unique contributors. That only stands out for me because I look at data when I look at the podcast. We can have, I mean, if I was to tell you how many unique listens we have, wow, that could blow the doors off of some people. But the smart people who want to know how many people that we're actually reaching say how many unique listeners. Both numbers are pretty impressive in my opinion, but nevertheless, unique contributions are always more. I mean, at $47, if I wanted to max out at $2,500, I could do, what's that, 1,250 contributions, right? No. Is that right? 125 contributions. Somewhere around there in math. The point is I could do more than one. But I'm not going to get too mathy about this. But the interesting thing about Beto at this point is, and, we're going to have more time to see if he comes out with he's obviously going to come out with a platform. He's obviously going to get, to some degree more specific. He has a different problem than Kamala Harris has. Kamala Harris, her policy, her platform, to the extent that she has a record, has been in the minority in the Senate. Not the same opportunity to vote for or against things necessarily over the years, but has to a certain extent in the Senate. It has a fairly good voting record. Nothing, for what it's worth, has a fairly good voting record. Not such a great record as a prosecutor. Beto O'Rourke does not have a good voting record as a Democratic lawmaker. And in fact, he has a bad one from the perspective of a Democratic voter. I think from the perspective of a Republican voter, probably a pretty good one if you were a rational person in a Republican Party, if that would even makes any sense anymore. So he's going to be a little bit evasive. And now there are some people coming out. There was a Facebook post. And this isn't, I think this is the only reason why I'm actually even reading this to some extent is that this is stuff that we were hearing during the race against Ted Cruz. Early on when we were talking about Beto, his name would come up and we'd say, look, he's not the kind of Democrat you would want if you were running in, anywhere else.
The Bronx.
Or not just the Bronx, though. I'm not sure this is the kind of Democrat you'd want if you were in Pennsylvania or in Ohio or in Michigan. Certainly not California
Hawaii,
or Massachusetts.
New York.
I mean, I think this is the kind of Democrat you would want if you were in Texas or North Dakota or West Virginia. It would start to make some sense.
West Virginia, because he doesn't have the kind of faux populism thing.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably a little bit more woke than you want to be in West Virginia.
Tell you what, Sam, I'm pretty goddamn woke.
El Paso, Texas, from a local standpoint, is pretty liberal. Right. I mean, this is not, Texas is a big state. There's a big difference between the Bronx in New York and Elmira in New York. And El Paso is more like the Bronx to the rest of Texas in many respects. Here is a post, and again, I read this only because I heard this during the primaries. after the primary, in the general election against Ted Cruz. And it makes a lot of sense. She says that she's a former Beto staffer. I was reluctantly very transparent about this. I did not vote for him in the 2018 primaries for a lot of reasons I'm about to dissect here, but at the end of the day, I stood behind him in the primary when it was him against Ted Cruz. I pretty much hate every single thing about Ted Cruz, she wrote. I worked my ass off for Beto. I worked 7 days a week, 12 plus hours a day, along with hundreds of other staff. I gave it all in the capacity I was in to see that his Senate campaign was successful. I fractured my foot, still knocked on doors for him on a scooter. I did all of this while acknowledging that he was far from the candidate I would have liked him to be. And she's going on because she knows she's going to get hammered on there for being less than unified, I guess. I mean, I think, look, and she goes on to say, I disagree wholeheartedly that discussion of Democratic candidates' strong points and weaknesses will hand Trump another 4 years. I wholeheartedly believe it's putting up a watered-down candidate devoid of a bold platform, substance, and follow-through that guarantees a Trump victory in 2020. I'm not convinced of that, but certainly I am convinced of the idea that putting up a candidate's strong points and weaknesses is not only not going to help Trump, I think it's going to hurt Trump. And then she goes into another piece that I'm going to skip for the time being because I'm not sure how much I'll come back to it. But she goes on to talk about Beto. He's not progressive, she says. He's not a member of the Progressive Caucus. That's true. Demonstrably true. He votes with the Republicans. Also demonstrably true. And he praises the centrist middle as if it's some sort of virtue. He had an opportunity to back a great Democrat running against a Republican, Will Hurd. We'll get to this later. And he opted to remain silent, to use the bipartisanship as a talking point to focus a lot of his campaign strategy and rhetoric on courting the white middle road voters who are actually just Republicans that were disillusioned with Ted Cruz. He rationalizes his vote for the Blue Lives Matters bill, but voted against the Harvey bill because he said it wasn't good enough. But the Blue Lives Matter bill was good enough, she asks. He goes on to say he had an opportunity to prove he could be a bold leader by being at the forefront of the baby jail and asylum issue at the border of Texas. He went and he toured the facilities, but then he took no positions. He could have called to abolish ICE, but he belittled it as a bumper sticker slogan, as if the rest of his campaign is not merely a bumper sticker slogans. There was enormous grassroots energy around the issue at the time, and it had national spotlight by many media outlets. People would have overwhelmingly had more respect for him by taking a stand, particularly in the Valley, where his rhetoric didn't resonate at all and people didn't turn out for him. Now, with that said, maybe he's just strategizing. I can't go that far. I'm running in Texas. That's my editorial. She goes on to say he and his family are known gentrifiers in El Paso. His wife has a long history of ushering in charter schools in El Paso, working for them, serving on schoolchoice.org boards, charter schools. And she goes on to talk about charter schools. I hope no one listening to the sound of my voice who's been listening to this program for more than a couple months needs me to explain the problem with charter schools. Particularly in Texas. He campaigns as if he's pro-Medicare for all, but he never signed on to H.R. 676, despite being confronted by voters about it seemingly hundreds of times on the campaign trail. He comes in only second to Ted Cruz in the contributions he takes from oil and gas industry. And everybody's talking about his performance in Texas as if he didn't lose. The fact is he overperformed. You got to go. If you look at Obama to Clinton, Texas is trending. We're not there yet. And he outperformed Clinton by 3 or 4 points. But it's Ted Cruz, who even some of the Trumpistas were not motivated about. But so that's from this Facebook poster. A former staffer take it for what it's worth. Oh, wait, I want to just read this one part that I don't necessarily agree with, and I'm a little bit nervous about it. She writes, there are hard truths that should be read and processed by quite a few people. Defaulting to charisma and cults of personality is the real losing strategy. Now, I'm not convinced of that, to be honest with you. My argument is not that Beto can't win because he has no policies. I think we can find a lot of example in American politics where charisma and cult of personality can take you a long way.
Yeah, politics are dumb as hell in this country.
Yeah, I mean, just go check out my
electorate.
book, Blaming the Electorate.
Thank you.
She writes, the culture of shaming people for having a genuine discussion about policy and voting history will only cause us to uplift a candidate devoid of substance to the general in 2020, of which people will not be inspired by, turn out to vote for, and that'll be a rehash of 2016 with people, blaming people who didn't vote. I just don't think that actually is what happened in 2016. I don't think that Clinton lost because she was all charisma and no policy. I don't think that was the issue.
Charisma.
And so I'm not convinced that Beto is problematic insofar as there's a trouble with him winning the general election. There may be, but I'm just not convinced that that's the reason is because he's charismatic. I do think that having a president who does not address the material concerns of Americans and relies on his own charisma, who will not even campaign for the Democrat running in his district against another Republican, could bring us a president who protects himself in office, loses hundreds, if not thousands, of Democratic seats across the country in state houses and whatnot. And I also am concerned about a politician who does not seem to have any politics, or to the extent that he does. We've talked on this program about there are Democrats whose policies I don't agree with, who may be opportunistic in many respects, but they do seem tethered to they seem to have parameters. You can push those people. My concern is that attempting to push Beto to a certain position is like, trying to push an air hockey puck. You just don't know which direction it's going to go in. And there's no indication from his history that, it's possible he could go, who knows what direction he could go in, but there's no indication that he has a tendency to move to the left. And there's also no indication that he's like, rooted.
Stop stealing my style, white boy.
No, people want to compare him to Obama, but Obama did have some kind of left liberal politics going in, which he sold out in many ways, but at least he had it starting out. If you don't have anything going in, what are you doing?
Also, regardless, even when Obama made quite centrist, tepid arguments, they were actual arguments. I said this before, but the striking contrast of a guy, it's almost like a Thomas Paine book filtered through a corporate management seminar. There's nothing. It's just word salad. It's incredible. It's an insult to the electorate.
We'll see.
Or an insult to some of the electorate.
Exactly.
That are dumb idiots that I hate.
So Helene Olin, who we've had on this program some time ago, she wrote a book about the sort of the scams of personal wealth.
Susie Orman type of people.
Yeah, talkers.
Yeah, she's smart.
And she wrote a really interesting piece about Beto O'Rourke continuing to live his best Generation X life. Now, I know there are people who get upset with the crapping on Generation X that happens here. I'm obviously sympathetic to Generation X to the extent that I am a member of that generation. And we grew up in a a pretty sterile situation. We had very little ability to impact the discourse, both culturally, societally, politically, because of the size of the baby boomers, who are now just starting to die and to leave the stage. Some not so much. I'm not necessarily. There's certainly some.
Joe Biden's sound drop.
Well, I mean, some I like have stick around, but
well, sure.
But she, also I think a member of Generation X, looks at this and points out a couple of, particularly the. I don't know if I would call this full-on misogyny, but certainly the double standard that exists with Beto, and how a woman could never get away with what Beto has done so far. She quotes Rebecca Traister saying, "The idea that a woman could ever, even in a self-deprecating way, a self-deprecating conscious acknowledgement joke about how she's helping to raise her kids is inconceivable." And of course, this is the fact. Of course. Never mind on the right. On the right, she would be burned at the stake. But even, frankly, in the center, there would be no room. And the center left, there would be no room for not looking side-eyed at a female candidate who says yeah, I'll get to the kids.
I never see my kids. It's awesome.
Unless it was Amy Klobuchar.
Said Elizabeth Warren.
Amy Klobuchar would be like, I beat my kids, and that's how I'll deal with Putin. And MSNBC would do a segment on how empowering that was.
That's possible.
Let's be real.
And she writes that Generation X, once so hip and so cool, grew up to be born-again traditionalists. The group, which ranges in age of just shy of 40 to those in their mid-50s, was never as liberated as advertised. From early on, many women of Generation X refused to define themselves as feminists, even as they supported feminist goals, told pollsters and demographers they would devote more time to their families than their own parents. She goes on to talk about Generation. I'm less interested in Generation X than the dual standard that exists for Beto. And I'm quite convinced part of that was, the Alex P. Keaton syndrome, where you're rebelling against your parents who are to the left of you. Not all of us did that, but many did in that era.
God, there are so many options to rebel against your baby boomer parents. Just be a communist. What's wrong with you?
You could do that. And so she goes on to write, you can compare O'Rourke, and this is a pretty apt comparison, with his fellow female Generation X contender, Kristen Gillibrand, who also formalized her presidential run this weekend, to see how this plays out in our lives, in our civic life. Gillibrand, who moved from conservative positions to more liberal ones over the years, and she's done this over an extended period of time. I mean, she's now been a senator for, I think, close to a decade, if I'm not mistaken. And prior to that, she was a member of the House up in what was then the 20th District of New York. I'm quite familiar with that district. In fact, I voted for her at the time. She was not good on immigration. She was not good on guns. Can't remember all of her positions, but those are the two that stuck out for me. And then she's appointed senator when Hillary Clinton is appointed Secretary of State. She runs again. She has moved significantly to the left. Now, mind you, her House district, considerably more conservative than Beto O'Rourke's. Considerably more. Like 20% more. At least. So Olin writes, she moved from conservative positions to more liberal ones over the years, branded as an opportunist Tracy Flick. She's openly and repeatedly discussed how she adjusts her schedule so she can spend more time with her children, with little and no credit, despite the fact that she's been outspoken for the better part of a decade of what could come to be called the Me Too issues. When she demanded that Al Franken resign in the wake of allegations he groped a number of women, many portrayed it as an operator looking to ace out a possible 2020 rival. Meantime, O'Rourke, who spoke out against the Affordable Care Act before he voted to defend it and enjoyed significant financial support from Republicans when he ran for Congress in 2012, is allowed to present himself as a progressive champion. Few seem to recall that O'Rourke declined to endorse Democrat Gina Ortiz-Jones when she ran for election this year against one of his friends, Representative Will Hurd, Republican Texas. His action quite possibly cost Jones the election. She lost by fewer than 1,000 votes.
You got to be loyal to your friends, though.
Yeah, it's a little bit concerning when those friends may not be politically aligned with you.
Yeah, what do the Bernie's not a Democrat folks think about that?
So instead of getting branded as a disloyal political shapeshifter, as some will call Gillibrand, O'Rourke is touted by many as a charming unifier. Now, the issue isn't whether Gillibrand should be called a political shapeshifter. The issue to me is, why isn't Beto O'Rourke being called a political shapeshifter? I get it. He ran in, well, again, a much more liberal district than Kristen Gillibrand, but was running statewide. But it's not like his voting patterns were formulated in his Senate run.
Can we style guide both of them are?
Exactly.
Well, she shapeshifts based on what the voters want, and while he shapeshifts based on, whose dad he's who he's married to and who his friends are. So, totally different.
I mean, you could argue that he was trying to appeal to the state of Texas, right? Not so much in his House district, and that's where you see the divergence, like you're saying. Like she had at the time, I think it was a 2-to-1 Republican to Democrat, probably on registration, maybe a little bit less. But certainly Republicans had the advantage in that district. I think it's changed. I think it's closer to 50-50 now. But so her votes may have reflected that district, whereas his votes didn't necessarily reflect that district. But it is interesting the way that the two are juxtaposed. Now, granted, he is charismatic, although I have to say that it's weird how much he has to move his arms to speak. I mean, honestly, I gesticulate, I stutter. Apparently I was dubbed on the 1000th episode of WTF as like the king of all ummers.
I think that was episode 600 or something like that.
It was 1000. It was
really?
the recent one, yes.
Oh.
No, they were going
there's
back.
an even more recent one?
Oh, yeah, 1000.
Oh, wow.
But I don't know. It is weird to contemplate like what it's going to take. I mean, the disadvantage a woman has with I don't say the exact same profile, but I mean, it is a pretty close approximation. I mean, if you want to make an analogy between these two, it's pretty accurate, seems to me.
Well, it's like someone said on Twitter, why would he stand for something when he could stand on something?
Can I make a now the side point outside of this essential point that you've broken down? And maybe it's actually not even a side point, it's a point in and of itself. And thanks for IMing it, Brendan, and I was going to mention this, that there's also the dimension that Hurd has come out publicly and been like, I'm supporting the Republican nominee, period. I don't care if my buddy's running.
Right.
So there's also, it's like that perfect fusion that is represented in all too many Democrats of, well, total personal and selfish, I will do literally anything for myself. That's Beto completely. And also I'll be sort of weak in a way because I will bend over backwards for people who actually do, operate on pretty intense, aggressive political principles as they should. And that also is another interesting, like, look, I will plug Bernie for a second, but I'm sure that this goes for all the rest of them. I mean, but Bernie's the one saying every speech, I will support the Democrat. I will support the Democrat. He's also spending more time talking about Trump than anybody else. And I just think it's such a perfect underline, though, that it's like Beto will screw over people who will vote for him and his own party happily, but then he will kowtow to a guy that he thinks is his buddy. And that guy's like, sure, but I'm voting for Trump.
And this is a good time to just pivot for a moment to Elizabeth Warren. Then we'll go to the fun half. We'll talk more about her, and we'll play that Beto clip. But let's talk about Elizabeth Warren talking about the Electoral College, because that tendency of Democrats that Beto had in endorsing the Republican candidate overheard over the Democrat, who ends up going and losing by 1,000 votes, and then having that same Republican say, "Yeah, no, it's not reciprocal."
He was buddies with him, right?
Well, apparently
they are buddies.
Apparently, it's
the guy didn't say their buddyship was canceled. He just said he's not voting for
my
his
love
buddy.
for him is unconditional.
Right, but Beto could have had the same, like, he's a great guy. He's one of my favorite members of Congress. Gina Ortiz, I look forward to working with her, and I endorse her because we're both Democrats.
Exactly.
But we'll have a beer, win or lose.
I'll invite my buddy up to D.C., and he can check out my office now that he's gone, once Gina Ortiz is in.
Take him out for a beer after he loses.
This dynamic of the Democrats pushing some type of like, I'm looking for the good Republicans, that I'm going to meet the Republicans halfway. This strategy has been a unequivocal failure over the past couple of decades. This idea that Democrats are going to show up at the knife fight with, like, a spoon. And, what I'm going to try and do first, I'm going to feed them some soup during this knife fight. No, it doesn't work. And this is what I like about Elizabeth Warren talking about the Electoral College. Let's play this clip.
The next question comes from Rukia Lumumba. She's a legal advocate and community organizer here in Jackson. She also happens to be the sister and former campaign manager of Jackson's current mayor, Chokwe Antar Lumumba. Her late father, Chokwe Lumumba, was also once the mayor of this city as well.
Pause for 1 second. Side note. We interviewed Chokwe Lumumba at Netroots Nation. He is considered self-proclaimed desire to be the most radical mayor in the country. Really interesting guy. Go back and look for that. I think that was in August, or the first week of August of 2018. But go ahead.
Once the mayor of this city as well. Rukia.
All right.
Good to
Thank
see
you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Jackson, Mississippi. Yeah. So voter disenfranchisement is real. Mm-hmm. In Mississippi, there are 23 felonies that, once convicted, ban a person from voting for the rest of their lives, literally limiting their citizenship and right to democracy. Mm-hmm. Moreover, residents' access to voting is limited by archaic voter registration processes and limited voting formats. How will you expand voting rights to the formerly incarcerated, ensure online voter registration, and non-excuse early voting?
All right. Great question. But can I go you one bigger? Yeah. And that is, I believe we need a constitutional amendment that protects the right to vote for every American citizen and to make sure that vote gets counted. We need to put some federal muscle behind that. And we need to repeal every one of the voter suppression laws that is out there right now. And I'll tell you one more. We need to make sure that every vote counts. And I want to push that right here in Mississippi, because I think this is an important point. You know, come a general election, presidential candidates don't come to places like Mississippi.
That's true.
Yeah. They also come to places like California and Massachusetts.
right? Because we're not the battleground states. Well, my view is that every vote matters. And the way we can make that happen is that we can have national voting, and that means get rid of the Electoral College and every vote.
Okay, so the means in which to get rid of the Electoral College would either be a constitutional amendment. There is also what is known, and we've talked about it on this program, the National Popular Vote Compact, which is essentially an agreement amongst states that they will alter their constitutions in such a way that they will agree to award their electors to the winner of the popular vote. And you need, obviously, enough states that equal 270 electors. Right now, Colorado was the most recent to vote this in and sign it into law at the very least. I don't know if they amended their constitution or not, but that brings the total to somewhere, I think, around 200. There's a couple of states that are looking to do this before the 2020 election, but we're not going to get to 270 anytime soon. I don't know that we'll ever get to 270 because I don't know that a Republican-dominated state is going to sign on to this for obvious reasons. So we're not going to get a constitutional amendment. We're not going to get this national popular vote compact is not going to go through anytime soon. What is the value of Elizabeth Warren in the context of a presidential election in 2020? Really a Democratic primary, but a presidential election in 2020. What is the value of her saying this? In addition to the fact that obviously these type of reforms take years and years, and these are long-term movements, the value of it is also signifying to both the Republican and the Democratic Party, to the American public, that there is something amiss here. That we're no longer going to just worship at the altar of norms that are problematic. The Electoral College, highly undemocratic, right? It's not one person, one vote. It just doesn't work out that way. If it was, we would have President Clinton right now. If it was, we would have President Gore. There may have been no Iraq war. Who knows what the trajectory of history? There may have not been a 9/11. Who knows what the trajectory of the United States would have been if we had actually followed the will of the people as expressed by the votes. Now, that's not to say that it's rigged or that it was a technical victory, although I think in the case of at least George Bush, I could tell you it was vote theft, and that was a function of the Supreme Court, as far as I'm concerned. But this is a problem. It's anti-democratic. And every person in the country, whether it is the law of the land or not, should be aware that it's anti-democratic. We should be aware that the Senate is fundamentally anti-democratic. That the number of people who control the policies of our government, of the lawmaking of our government, is less than the people who are at the whim of those people. In other words, there are millions of people more who voted for Democratic senators than there are who voted for Republican senators. Yet Republicans have control of the Senate because of the way that senators are voted. Each state gets two, regardless of population. That's the way it's been set up. Whether we like it or not, that is the Constitution. We could change it, but we're not going to get to the point where we can change it. But we should know that it's fundamentally anti-democratic because that's going to implicate other politics. And Democratic politicians are no longer afraid of raising these issues And it is because they have, rightly so, sort of, are able to begin to see the reality of the situation, which is many of these anti-democratic features are not just a function of legacies, but are also enhanced and abused by the Republican Party. Right? I mean, you have Democrats talking about reinstituting the filibuster. In other words, we will get back into power if we take over the Senate. And because we know the Senate is an anti-democratic institution, at least in the context of the Republicans, when the Republicans control it, just structurally, it's almost impossible for it to be anti-democratic when Democrats control it because they will get more votes. We will never have, at least in our lifetimes, an era where Democrats will control the Senate, where the majority of Americans have not voted for Democrats to be the Senate, to control the Senate. And despite that, Democrats, you still have Democrats. Democratic senators are saying, we're going to give them, even though that's the most democratic outcome the Senate can exist, we're going to give the minority the ability to filibuster, to stop us. Whereas Republicans, who sit in control of the Senate with far less people voting for them, they strip the filibuster.
In the naive and absolutely horrifying words of Richard Blumenthal, and this was about a year and a half ago, so maybe he's wisened up, 2 wrongs don't make a right.
Right. And Beto O'Rourke, on one hand, when he endorses the Republican or he refuses to endorse the Democrat running against his Republican buddy because he wants to maintain some sense of collegiality, when he gets up there and he says, I want to bring people together, which incidentally is what Glenn Beck says. It's what Glenn Beck says when he was apologizing for supporting Trump, and it's what Glenn Beck said the other night on Hannity when he said, I'm supporting Trump now. I'm against Trump. We need to bring people together. I'm for Trump. We need to bring people together.
Just different groups of people bringing
together. In other words,
credulous
bringing
liberals or
people
white nationalists
together in the context of politics is meaningless claptrap. When Elizabeth Warren comes out and calls for the abolition of the Electoral College, at the very least, even though we're not going to see that policy change for a long time, if ever, she's putting down a marker and saying, I know, and you should know, there's a fundamentally undemocratic dynamic that is at work here. And it is highly problematic to providing people with the material benefits that they want out of their government. And when that is stymied, when the government is not working despite the fact that the people have expressed their will as to how they want it to work, and particularly when you do not have the arc of justice in your favor, you start to get stuff like Donald Trump. And so that's why I love the fact that Elizabeth Warren is making a campaign issue of something that will never happen with her as president.
But then her friends across the aisle might not want to have a beer with her later, and that might make her sad.
It may make her sad. I don't think so. I don't think she cares that much about the beer.
It's not just about the beer. It's also about friendship. And friendship is great. And democracy is great. And I just believe if we can have friendship plus democracy equals MC square. And lots of moving around.
Everything he says with a note.
And then if you
guys
am
strumming a guitar.
Matt, if we could bed a West Wing a soundtrack under this, that would really be great.
All right, we got to take a break. I wanted to get to more clips of Elizabeth Warren.
Iraq. Can we just mention we missed? This is the 16-year anniversary of the invasion of Iraq. So and it's all, everybody missed it in prep, but that's all around. So we should just know that we killed hundreds of thousands of people. We lied about it.
Ari Fleischer's still lying about it.
Ari Fleischer's still lying about it. And the country, though, was brought together, actually, in a way through total lies, propaganda, and Islamophobia.
Not totally together, I can tell you that
70%,
right now.
I believe,
true.
On the eve of the invasion. With the
done
honorable exceptions
of
Noam Chomsky, Janine Garofalo, and Sam Seder.
There was others. But you
McGovern.
couldn't hear about him that much, actually. All right, we're going to take a break. I just realized, too, that would mean 11 days from the 15-year anniversary of me doing radio. Just realized.
Far out.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half. Just a reminder, folks, it is your support that makes the show possible. By becoming a member, you support The Daily Show. We bring you long-form interviews. We bring you some deep dives into the news. And then, as a way of saying thank you, we give you the fun half, wherein we make fun of different people. And today, I know we're going to blow the lid off this whole David Pakman thing, which is blowing up on the internet. And Mike Cernovich apparently loses another one. This guy's completely retreating into a sort of a I think he's going to be a yoga guy soon. Would be my guess.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing wrong with
it.
it.
Great.
But
no,
that's what I'm saying.
To yoga.
Get him out of. That's what I'm saying. Get him out of politics.
Fair enough. That's right. Namaste, bro.
In the fun half.
Namaste.
We're going to talk a little bit more about. We're going to talk about the. Donald Trump's love affair with a his mentor, maybe model, Bolsonaro. Definitely handing it to those SJWs with Donald Trump. We will talk all about that in the fun half.
His sons are so fit, and they're connected to gangs that kill people. It's so unfair. My sons are so stupid.
So
Hashtag me too.
Boys, you can become a member of the Majority Report by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. Jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code Majority, get 10% off. Michael, last night was Tuesday.
Last night was a incredible historical deep dive with Harvey K. and Daniel Bessner. You're going to have to watch it to find out. There's too much to even tease. I will say I was actually pretty proud of myself with our opening commentary connecting the history of imperialism and Gramscian's hegemony ideas with the terrorism in Christchurch. This Sunday, Illicit History of Joe Biden with Zach Carter. We're releasing an illicit history for everybody with Nelson Denis on Puerto Rico and colonialism. Patreon.com/TMBS. Get the whole thing and become also you can watch us on our YouTube channel where things are now very regularly clipped up, and you'll get a real sense of the show that way at Michael Brooks Show on YouTube, patreon.com/TMBS.
Jamie.
So out today on the Antifada, we talk with cartoonist, writer, and all-around provocateur Ellie Valley. He's fresh off some altercations with Jewish activists like Ben Shapiro and Meghan McCain, Chelsea Clinton. We had a good conversation about his little, the conflicts he's having with the Zionist establishment, the idea of Jewish identity, the Zionist idea versus the diaspora idea. We talk about his book, Diaspora Boy, and also what the Zionist establishment might make of a certain presidential candidate from Vermont. So check it out.
And Matt.
King Philip's War and the Mary Rowlandson captivity narrative. We talk about sort of the moment when the Indians or Native Americans that live in the Massachusetts, New England area realized that they were going to need to fight to keep their land. And check it out.
All right, see you. Yes. See you in a moment. Oh, just a reminder. Today's episode of The Majority Report is supported by Pitchfork Economics with Nick Hanauer, a weekly podcast that explores why rising income inequality will lead to pitchforks and what we can do about it. Every week, Hanauer is joined by some of the world's most original economic thinkers in a convention-busting exploration of who gets what and why in the American economy. If you want to learn how to make the economy work for all Americans, subscribe to Pitchfork Economics at pitchforkeconomics.com or wherever you get your podcasts. See you in the fun half. What was that? Is that me? Jesus.
Gold bond post roll.
Oh, is that on air?
What's that? Gold bond post roll? Is that what it was? I'm going to put up the IMs here. I haven't done that enough as of late. Forgive me, folks. Let's do this. Get rid of this. Get rid of that. Get rid of this. A lot of... Oh, shoot. Sorry. May have, if you've already IM me, you may want to IM me again because I just eliminated one or two people. Secret Identity Politics says, Beto is the human resources guy who pulls out a guitar during your job interview. Winnipeg Craig, has there been any retaliation since your latest hit on David Pakman? We got to check and see, but there's a call. We'll get to that.
Well, the media's ablaze with it.
Water Boat from Kashmir. I've recommended this book before, but it's so apropos to Monday and Tuesday's interviews that I recommend it again. It's called Cities of Salt. It's a novel written by a Saudi novelist who had his citizenship revoked, and the book is banned in all of the GCC countries.
Gulf Cooperation Council.
It is a historical novel taking place in Arabia right after World War I. The author's mind-boggling nuance really shows how dictatorships function with the support of the global North, solidarity with New Zealand. Okay. All right, let's go to this. I've been really struck at how Dave Rubin has been so forceful. As you know, we spoke yesterday about Devin Nunes, a member, really, of the Republican leadership. When you are the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, as he was before the Republicans lost the House, and you are suing obvious satire sites on Twitter, satire handles, which prior to the lawsuit had virtually no followers. But that shouldn't even count, whether they have 1 million followers or 100 followers. Devin Nunes' cow and Devin Nunes' mom were just satire sites. Nunes seems to claim that they're bots, but they're clearly thoughtful in their satire, whether you think it's funny or not.
Shouldn't talk about your mom that way.
Now, here's the thing. As you know, it has been a pillar of everything that Dave Rubin is about, to protect free speech, to allow ideas to flourish, to allow criticism, to not be a snowflake. This is what's tearing America apart, is this snowflakeism. So I want to compliment Dave Rubin for his tweets and his support for those people doing the satire. Do we have that? Oh, we don't have that clip. I'm sorry. My apologies. We do have a clip of him with, what's his face? Dennis Prager, where Dennis Prager thanks him for pretending to be a liberal so that they can use him as some type of Trojan horse.
Prager also has some self-assessment in this as well about how potentially he's used.
Right. And now Dave Rubin also, to be fair, says, wait, Dennis, you're hurting your core brand proposition by reminding people of how I make my money.
We're filming, Dennis.
Is the news thing to say this out loud? No, I mean, you know better than me, but it's a little confusing.
What's in your cigar? Some type of wacky tobacco? Go ahead.
I want you to continue to say you're a liberal because you're of great use to good values.
Well, don't worry, I'm not doing it for your use of me. I'm doing it for myself.
No. It's like Christians who say to me.
That's even better. Now, wait a second. You're trying to say you're making money off of me. I'm making money off of it, too.
I just want to say, I mean, you're saying that you're saying that I'm doing it cynically, and I just want to say, actually, I really am doing it cynically. It's for me.
But I want to make it clear that I'm not doing it for your benefit. I'm a businessman.
It's like FUBU, for us, by us. 4D, by Dave.
Oh, wait a second. We shouldn't have done
Maybe
this.
we shouldn't have said it.
Can we
You sure
edit
we want to
this?
say this out loud?
I'm going to take a nice long puff on this stogie while you continue to insult me to my face.
Use to good values.
Well, don't worry. I'm not doing it for your use of me.
I'm
doing it for myself.
No.
Yeah.
It's like Christians who say to me, we would love you to come to Christ, but you are so valuable to us as a Jew when you defend us Christians.
Yeah.
And they're right. You are valuable in the best sense of the word, because America
Pause it. What is the valuable in the best sense of the word? You have value to me.
What are the bad senses of that word?
We can leverage you.
In the sense that if you accept that cosmology, that you literally burning in a lake of hellfire for eternity is worth it,
And it's
because it will forward a tax cut.
so fortunate for Christians in this country that Dennis Prager is here, or God knows what could happen to the Christians here.
Also, you don't choose to be Jewish, right? So, like, you can always find, like, some stupid traitor member of any group to be a conservative, but, like, you do choose to be a liberal, so I don't really know what that even means. Is it just that he says he's a liberal, and that's what makes him one?
Exactly. That's what
Exactly. I say it's about ideas.
I'll tell you where I get it certified by my bank account.
Yeah.
You when you defend us Christians.
Yeah.
And they're right. You are valuable in the best sense of the word, because America needs people who are clearly liberal and to be honest, and fall into the category of kosher as gay.
Yeah.
To say, hey, hello, the conservatives are not hate mongers. Hello, they should
Pause
be
it.
heard.
So in other
Is that your
words,
gay impression?
in other words, it's great that you're gay, because even though you're all against the idea of identity, you can leverage that identity.
All of a sudden, in the last couple of years, anal sex became acceptable if it involved banning Muslims from the country. Super interesting. These people are interested in ideas.
To say, hey, hello, the conservatives are not hate mongers. Hello, they should be heard.
Hello.
And maybe every so often you should read National Review.
Right.
Or watch a PragerU video.
Wait a second. What about my videos?
Also,
maybe-
Rubin Report.
Maybe you should watch Rubin Report
Rubin
too.
Report too.
Yeah, I don't know.
Trusted liberal video recommender Dave Rubin.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't know, because there's a lot of ideas in my channel. I'm not getting it. I'm driving it big. Hey,
This
Dennis.
is-
By the way, I say that as a gay person. There you go, kid.
What is
Keep it up, you dumb little fuck.
What's fascinating about this too? I mean, aside from the fact that Rubin realizes that it's not just himself who's using his identity to sell a bill of goods; that others are exploiting him too.
Hello.
But the thing that's sort of fascinating about this too is that they do this. The conservatives. I've talked about this many times. I went down to that Glenn Beck rally 10 years ago, and there were very few black people, brown people. Virtually none.
Really?
And there was, I know that comes as a big shock, but there was a black guy. I did see a black guy. And he was literally walking around with another guy, a white guy, who's, I think, his buddy, who had brought the black guy to the rally and had a sign that says, with an arrow, "Do I look racist?" Because he's with a black guy. There's a video of this. I think you can find it on our YouTube channel.
Hello.
And I swear to you, you can see like a half a dozen people lined up taking photos to prove that this was not a racist rally. And so they elevate
So wait, but
anybody who is not a white male to ostensibly prove that they are, I don't think this is it.
But quick question, in light of that, should we change the Ben Dixon chyron?
Well, hold on. They do this to prove, they think that it proves that they're not racist, but it's really just for them, right? Because Dave Rubin is not convincing any actual liberals that conservatives are not hate mongers. Now, he is, I think, effectively probably steering some misguided, immature white males for a while down a possible road that is pretty ugly. But the idea that he's telling America that conservatives are not hate mongers because he's married to a man is just a self-delusion, and that's all that they want.
I like the two polls though. It's like Ben Shapiro's like, I won't go to your anniversary. That's never going to happen. And Prager's sitting there like, yeah, it's great about you. I mean, let's face facts here. You're completely
gay, and we appreciate
but you're
that.
friggin' gay, and you call yourself a liberal. And that might help with some of the analytics of my PragerU videos, you dumb little, you beautiful, dumb little prick.
Yo,
Hello.
he's less convincing to liberals than Candace Owens is to black people.
I don't think Candace Owens is convincing to her own family. I think what's great is this is just the way every time in these clips, Dave Rubin always has this little bit of like, ooh, it doesn't exactly sound right. It sounds like you're saying I'm a complete empty vessel who's only useful for my identity and pretending to be something I'm not. Is that you wouldn't be saying that? Would
I'm
you
gonna go read
Dennis?
Kierkegaard.
He's not that smart.
You know, Dave, I'm sure that we would be really open to having our views changed on this in an open exchange of ideas with you.
Yeah, debate us.
It's important to be able to have civil conversations about these things.
Here it is, Matt. I found it. It's you can scroll through it and you'll see it there. I don't know it's probably like halfway through. It's keep going. It's where is Matt? Oh yeah, back. This is unbelievable. True. I think that's true. You know. Look at all the people lining up to take photos. God.
Can I ask you a couple questions? So what brings you out here today?
Trying to be a capitalist.
Oh, what you selling?
Flags.
What do they say?
Don't tread on me.
And what's that mean?
What's old Benjamin Franklin saying? So it just means don't let anybody tread on you. I gotta make a sale.
Wait, keep going. Watch this.
Sure. Can I ask you, would you be out here if you weren't selling flags today?
Probably not. Tell you the truth, son.
Wow.
Yeah.
In other news,
that's the one of the that bullshit videos from back in the day. So people can check that out. But I mean, that's what that Rubin thing is all about. It's sort of stunning, I admit.
yeah. In other news, I have signed up to be Fox's token communist. I'm going to go on Tucker Carlson's show and agree with everything he says. And then maybe some of my fellow communists will also sign up for fascist and racist border policies. Although I think that slot might have already been filled by Angela Nagel.
You're going to be the conduit. That's why we like you so much, Jamie. Speaking of how conservatives are not all hateful and whatnot, here's some merch on the Jordan Peterson site. It will just. Here you go. You can check out the new Lobster Collection merchandise. This is the Public Intellectual who's selling the Lobster shirts. Official merchandise, Lobster Collection. Let's see what else we got.
Well, I wonder how that transition off Patreon's going.
Yeah, I wonder. It must be going pretty good. We're going to sell a lot of lobster. Here's
this is
lobster T-shirt.
This is Jay Cruz.
You know what's helpful about you, Dave, is that you're a dumb gay guy who says he's liberal.
And let's see what else we got here. Oh, here, let's zoom in on this one here. We have Jordan Peterson. Oh, this is wonderful. This is Jordan Peterson taking a picture on his tour. Was this in Australia or New Zealand? New Zealand in February. So just a couple of weeks ago before the mass killing of 49 Muslims at two different mosques. And there's Jordan Peterson posing for a picture. Now, look, this happens. You hear about this all the time, right? People go and they pose for a picture and they pull off a shirt or they open up their shirt that says like, whatever, down with Trump. And I'm taking a picture with Trump. This is one where there is no indication that there is another piece of clothing around there. There is a shirt that says in very big letters, like, I wear glasses. It's conceivable to me that if I didn't have my glasses on, I don't know why I wouldn't, but if someone walked up to me with a shirt that had small writing, I wouldn't be able to read it. But I could even read, "I am a proud Islamophobe," and then a long litany of things like pedophilia, rape, wife-beating, homophobia, misogyny. It goes on and on and on. Now, maybe Jordan Peterson didn't even look at that shirt, but it's very hard to believe, isn't it?
I think it's quite. How amazing would it be? And there's no doubt he saw this shirt, in my mind, unless he's maybe, Jordan Peterson might have drank some cider or something before.
I tell you what his perspective is. Like, I'm not going to. You be you.
You do you.
You do you,
man.
And I'm not going to. I'm not going to in any way censor this.
Yeah, you do you.
But the thing is that what is bullshit about that position is you are not embracing free speech by putting your arm around and taking a picture and posing for a picture with someone like this. You are literally embracing the notion that being a proud Islamophobe is something to be proud about.
Also, if Jordan Peterson,
identity,
if Jordan Peterson had a thoroughgoing you perspective, we wouldn't know who he is because he wouldn't have thrown a tantrum about transgender students, and he would be teaching in Canada, and he wouldn't be on our show.
Of course. It is, I mean, it really is stunning that this guy's not held to account for this. I don't, has he come out with any statement? Any statement of regret or
nope.
Pretending like he didn't see it? No, he's proud of it.
Fuck no.
Yeah, live and let live.
I think it would be, what I would love is if there was a montage of videos of actually all of them, like even like Sam Harris being like, take this the wrong way, but the fact, Dave, that you're a complete moron, and I'm able to sit here and compare Ezra Klein's at the Ku Klux Klan, and I know that not only won't you push back, but you probably might not even know what the Klan is really helpful. And then like Jordan Peterson's just like, you're gay, so I get to come here and rant about gender all day and, push back, and that's super helpful.
I like some of the responses on Reddit. This guy says, pretty sure when Peterson does events like this, people either pay for money for a meet and greet pass and a picture, or if he's doing free pictures, they wait in a very long line. So he says, either JBP didn't see or notice the shirt as he was probably rapid firing photos with many people, or he saw it, probably internally rolled his eyes, but understood that this dude just waited in a long-ass line, and it's easier just to take the photo and move on to the next person.
Yeah, I'm sure he had a problem with the shirt in his mind.
It's just a cringy meme shirt. That's what this guy says.
I don't know what actually happened. None of us
to
do.
be fair,
but neither of those is exculpatory.
But that's the point. Like you're doing the simplest explanation is he saw it and didn't register anything and took the photo because that's what the available evidence is.
But the most factual and obvious conclusion is, I mean, unless that we can't find it for whatever reason, is that he knows this picture is out there and doesn't feel in any way obligated to say, I regret that I took the picture with that guy.
I was going to say he got apple contamination and he couldn't see for a while. But also that, probably.
All right, let's...
he says it's a word created by fascists, Islamophobia, that is. So that's what he said previously. So just see.
Oh, that makes sense. I see what he's saying. Let's go to the phones. You're calling from a 602 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. It's Armand in Vietnam.
Armand in Vietnam. What's on your mind?
Hey, I haven't been able to catch the program too much since it's kind of on pretty late here.
Click.
I just, slightly late. I wanted to do a bit of reporting on what it was like during the summit here and kind of like an opening of my mind because most of the world tends to have a pretty negative opinion of Trump. But Vietnam is actually one of the few countries, whether it be at lack of information or just total love and ignorance for their own country. They seem to have a super huge positive view of really any foreign leader that comes here. which might be traced back to sort of, I guess there's like a political ignorance here, either to just, ignore all political activities involving really anything, whether it's just not caring or also, somewhat forced by the government here. But anywho, so for the first time in my life, like I never expected this. Not only Kim Jong-un, but also Trump were seen as heroes here. I would have never imagined a world where again, I'm in right now, but to see school children waving North Korean flags as Kim Jong-un enters, to seeing the whole entire sections of the city of Hanoi shut down for just two assholes having a meeting is just like, it was just shocking.
Yeah. Well, that's not terribly surprising that they shut down, the city in that respect. But so what else do you have? Obviously we all know that the summit was a failure and a dramatic failure to the point now where the lead negotiator for the North Korean team from the United States has been sidelined by Trump because he's mad because he wants to blame somebody else. So what else? Do you have anything else?
Yeah. I did want to bring up one other topic. It's just, again, I understand that I'm not in the West, but it's just so weird to see politics be so, to see these two leaders be so celebrated in that way was just kind of shocking. Secondly, I've never been a huge TYT fan, but I went on the TYT channel a couple weeks ago, and there's a huge presence of accounts that, literally I would go on some of them and they would have Russian videos uploaded of just total hate for TYT. Like there's absolutely no positive comments to any of the content. Are we worried enough about this? It seems like things are really stepping up in that regard.
I'm not worried about Russian videos complaining about TYT, if that's what you mean.
No, not Russian videos. Some of the profiles had Russian videos uploaded, but every TYT video. I just went to one, and I was curious if a lot of them.
I'm not clear
every
what
TYT video.
What is. What? There's a lot of Russian bots. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Jake Ugury's sellout.
Come
to homepage.
Yeah,
you will not vote for Bernie Bernstein.
I think we have like a lot.
Jimmy Dore is the only one who tells truth on TYT.
To worry about.
They are fucking corporate Selowski. Every time Jake is on the show, it is a lie. The Russian story was total fake. Jimmy telling the truths. Fuck. Fucking
appreciate the call. I'm not even sure I fully understand.
Sellout.
Calling
fuck
from
all the TY fucking sellout. They're burning, they steal. Fucking teeth.
Calling
Fuck Ben
from a
Michaelowitz.
757 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 757.
This is Corey from Indianapolis.
Hello, Corey from Indianapolis. What's on your mind?
Hey, I had a question about court packing.
Yep.
So, quick background. My fiance and I are both progressives, Bernie supporters. She listens to NPR on the way to and from work every day, and they mentioned court packing, but they didn't really explain anything of it. So she asked me about it when she got home. I told her what I knew, and we did a little research. But she had some concerns that I wanted to get your input on.
Yeah.
So the first one she raised was, like, how is that not an abuse of power or in violation of the idea of checks and balances?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by a violation of the checks and balances. The checks and balances is ensconced in the Constitution. And the Constitution says nothing about.
I guess I mean the idea of it.
Well, I think that I think there it is, akin to things like we're not going to hold a hearing for a nominee, right? Like what Mitch McConnell did. It certainly is an assault on some level on some of the norms of the institution. I would agree with that.
Right.
And we should say, and I should say this, look, I interviewed somebody who had done some research on this recently on Ring of Fire, and the attempt to pack the court at the time was not met with the same type of questioning and scrutiny as it is today when FDR brought it up, because the court had ossified, largely because the Republicans at the time had rolled back the pensions for justices. And they had done this to maintain people on the court, right? It's a different era. And
right.
What
we were reading about that.
Yeah, and what ended up happening was that FDR was able to the threat of court packing actually ended up returning the existence of those pensions. I don't know if those pensions have the same import today that they did back then, but I personally would prefer to see a term limits on the justices. And if the threat of court packing brings about term limits, I'm all for it.
Yeah, that's one thing that I told her, that I'm in favor of the term limits as well. Another concern that she expressed was, let's say we do elect a progressive and that court packing does end up happening. What is going to stop the next Republican president from doing the same?
I mean, I think that is why, in my mind, the best course of action is term limits, because I don't know what would prohibit the next president from doing that, short of perhaps maybe some statute, maybe you could pass a law under a completely dominated Democratic government that says that the president doesn't have that power. Then you would take it to the Supreme Court. Presumably, the Supreme Court would have then been court packed in your favor, and they could
right.
rule. I mean, that's we're going to go through. We're in the era of this, and we're going to continue to go through it. I mean, this is it's a different era that we're living in. And people on the left can either sort of gain that understanding, or they can, just continue to lose and have that era just ongoing. They're not participating. They're just bystanders.
And it's not like we haven't considered
right.
this stuff before.
Right. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's, we've been down this road. There's been different eras where institutions are more or less, sort of like sportsmanship and comedy, and it's more or less, and we're in a less period. And sometimes you have to rise to that reality. Appreciate the call, Corey.
Gotcha.
Next time, tell your girlfriend not to hide behind you and come up and ask her own questions. Calling from a 651 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm Eloise originally from the Twin Cities, but I'm calling from Portland.
Hi, Eloise. What's on your mind?
Recently I saw a documentary that was of the defense team for Dilma Rousseff during the impeachment proceedings against her, and it got me thinking, or at least one.
I'm sorry, documentary about who?
Dilma Rousseff.
Okay.
Dilma Rousseff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there was a right-wing legislator that, I'm loosely paraphrasing this, but they say, you claim it is an issue when we abolish labor rights, yet we have 11 million plus unemployed. And they use it to justify the repeal of labor rights. And God willing that we don't get to that point, I want to know, what is the best way to prevent this from happening in the U.S.? Or what is the ideal way to protect workers' rights?
What is the ideal way to protect workers' rights? I mean,
yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's twofold. It's getting a president in who's going to appoint people to National Labor Relations Board or I would say three things. National Labor Relations Board who are going to empower unions, And then I think it's also getting a legislature who is also going to empower unions, and then you let unions also, empower worker rights. But I'll also say, like, the best way is going to be for workers to take those rights.
Hell yeah.
Can I add just like, I think, of course, all of that, and then obviously workers need to organize. But I think, particularly in the Brazil example, and this has been like something I've focused on a lot because I think you actually see it here, like with Trump campaigning on Drain the Swamp. And the next phase of the war on labor in Brazil, the same prosecutor that put Lula in jail without any evidence, who was leading in all the polls, is the justice minister in Bolsonaro's government now. And he regularly talks about corruption inside labor unions. So people also need to not have generic corruption discourse. They need to recognize the way this rhetoric of corruption has been weaponized to target labor unions, actually historically and presently as well. And I think that there's going to need to be a lot of work in cleaning up even what we, understanding what labor is and the vital role it plays in a democratic society.
Okay, but on the same token, that doesn't mean that unions have not fallen victim to corruption problems in the past.
They definitely have.
These are the
but
real
there's
problems.
a bigger point about how it's leveraged.
Is always, to empower the workers from the bottom and for the workers to empower themselves to really take control of these worker institutions as they are supposed to be.
Appreciate the phone call. Let's go to the phones. I got a weird echo on that last call. Calling from
Hello?
a 509 area code. What?
I played the Prager thing.
Oh. I got a weird echo on that last call. Yeah, it was weird. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 509?
Damn, this is Ronald Reagan.
Oh, Ronald Reagan. What's on your mind?
I wanted to tell you a story about law school real quick.
Oh, sure. Great. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a good one. So I think it was my second or third year I took an intellectual property class.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big, like the sort of the big projects that you do throughout the semester, and it culminates in, whatever bullshit, that we had to do was litigating intellectual mocks, right? Like these sort of mock claims. And we were divided into
moot
groups.
Court.
And so,
moot court. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, but it was more like the behind the scenes negotiations that lawyers would do before you just go straight to court, right?
Yeah, okay.
So anyhow, so me and my group and I should say, we were representing the Da Vinci Italian soda syrup company. Are you familiar?
I'm not, but I believe you.
You can imagine the product I'm talking about, right? The big tall bottles that they put in coffee, drinks, and these sorts of things.
Sure.
So our competitors, Torani, which is another Italian soda company, they were accusing us of violating their copyright and their intellectual property because our label was too similar to theirs. So you have to go through and sort of assess all of the circumstances, right? So are the products direct competitors? Where are they placed sort of in the grocery aisle? Is there intent to deceive the consumer? And then you want to look at the design elements. Torani uses red, white, and green, but those are that's the Italian flag, right? So it's not like they invented that color combination. And you want to get into all of the facts. And our defense was that our design was sufficiently unique as to have avoided any infringement on their intellectual property. But do you know what would have been absolutely devastating to our case is if the Torani Council had approached us and said, you know what, a week before you changed your label, the head of your marketing company called the head of our marketing company and asked, hey, how did you design the label for your bottle?
Okay.
Suddenly, we have literally no case.
It's so deep.
Because they can show not only that clearly we copied, but that there was intent, right? I mean, this goes to the heart of the matter.
Right.
And so David Pakman is out there acting like this is some big fucking joke. But I take the law very seriously. And yeah, it's great that you asked how to build the set. That only proves your culpability. And, you know, I'm ready to throw down for you, Sam. I don't know anything about intellectual property other than the course I took 10 years ago.
Right, but you seem pretty on top of it, though, I got to say.
Yeah. I don't know much, but I do know about theft.
Don't sell yourself short.
Let's look at the facts. He's not like a guy on YouTube reviewing, you know, toys for kids or whatever thing. He's a direct competitor.
Right.
And this is another submission I would use in a court of law. Somebody in the YouTube comments said, I literally thought Pakman was filming from your studio for a while, LOL. But it's not LOL to me, okay? So he's acting like, oh, I changed studios, and don't worry, I put this screen up on my left-hand side. But it's clear what he's trying to do. He's trying to benefit directly or indirectly from your branding, which is unique to you and your show. And this is a serious thing. So, you know, everybody's laughing about it. David thinks it's all in good fun. But we'll see if he's laughing when he gets subpoenaed or whatever they do in that type of a court.
That last part does not give me full confidence in your skills as my attorney when you say when he gets whatever they do. But we do have a clip where he's called out. Now, what are the two clips that we have here? I'm glad you.
I guess these are just he's asked. I think followed up. Somebody follows up on Reagan's.
What are the two different clips, though?
I think they're consecutive. I think they just clipped them two different ones.
All right, let's dig into this. Here we go. Why don't you stay on the phone, Reagan, because I think you're implicated in this.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, David. This is Brian from Seattle.
Hey, Brian. What's going on?
Hey. Well, first of all, it's an honor to get to talk to you. I've been watching your show for a while, and I appreciate what you do.
Pause it for 1 second. Now,
wow.
I just want confirmation around Reagan. This Brian from Seattle, that's not you, is it?
No.
Okay.
I've never heard of this guy.
All right. To be fair, because it sounded a little like a fake call, but go ahead.
I wanted to real briefly, I don't want to get into this whole, majority report thing, because, the reality is the whole thing is kind of a joke anyway.
Of course it is.
But
wrong.
Briefly,
pause it for 1 second. Pause it for 1 second.
Pause.
Hold on. You're
wrong.
Your phone is breaking up a little bit. Ronald Reagan?
I said pause it for 1 second.
Okay, we did.
Wrong.
Oh, wrong. Okay, good. Now I'm also looking at this. Somebody gave $50, or is that?
You can do different monetary denominations.
Wow. All right. Wow. Okay.
That was my point the other day. Wow, indeed.
Puts that super chat right up on top of that board there as he's just go ahead.
But real briefly, just to give you some context, the guy that was actually calling in, as a bunch of people I saw in your chat are familiar, is a guy that goes by Ronald Reagan that calls into the Majority Report all the time. And he's a smart guy. He's an immigration attorney, so he
pause it. That part is true.
Right.
That part is true.
Which part?
That I'm smart.
Right. Okay. Good.
Immigration attorney, so he discusses issues a lot of the time about the border wall and ICE and things like that. And he's a smart guy, and he has a lot of interesting things to say. I also think he is used to getting straight through on the Majority Report because they know him, and he has a lot to say about.
Wow.
Let me tell you a story. Friday,
this guy's out calling in. First of all, the next thing that happens on this video better be that David Pakman shuts him down for implying that the show is somehow corrupted, that our phone processes are corrupted. I hope Pakman shuts this guy down.
Yeah, it's not we're making people pay to get through to us.
Right, exactly. I mean, this is akin to the John McCain moment where that voter said that Barack Obama was.
This is where David's supposed to go. No, sir. Charter Report's a good show.
No,
we just happen to have our disagreements.
They do not
have
a corrupt phone system.
I may have stolen his set. We may have disagreements on that, but they run a good show, and there is not a corrupt phone line.
Let's see if he shuts
we just happen to have a disagreement.
Here we go.
Report because they know him and he has a lot to say about topics, and I kind of feel like the issue comes down to.
Jesus.
David Pakman doesn't let me immediately get through and talk, so he's holding everyone hostage. And
so you think, in other words, that this is a personal gripe, that he doesn't like that he can't immediately get through to
Not even so much personal. Yeah. I mean, not even so much personal as I think he has become kind of entitled to that, like,
entitled.
His voice gets to get through. He gets to get priority on air, which, in that context, that he's an immigration attorney and he has very.
Can we pause it real quick?
Yeah, we can pause it. Sure, of course. No, whatever you say, Ronald Reagan.
I got a story for Brian.
Whatever you say, you're completely entitled, apparently. Apparently you have run of the show.
It's a pause clips now.
Yeah. I got a story for Brian in Seattle. Friday I call. I'm on hold 44 minutes, only to hear Sam say, and one more caller, we're going to Mindy. Fucking Mindy was the last caller. This is after an hour, this is the special treatment that I'm basking in over here on your show.
Listen. Right now, I'm looking at my call thing. We have 30 calls lined up. There are literally 7 people who have been on hold for 43 minutes. 7 people. Then it goes down from there. And so I just go into the pool of 43-minute holders for the most part. Occasionally I'll jump out of it, just to mix it up a little bit. And I'll take I'll randomly pick out of that 43-minute pool. Now, if I run out of 43 minutes, I'll go down to the 37-minute pool of people, et cetera, et cetera.
But the idea that this is about hurt feelings, because I've been trying to get through to Pakman.
Well, I believe that
is my favorite. Take.
That I believe that part. There's no doubt. You're a vindictive person, and if Pakman doesn't let you on, you're going to burn the house down.
I'm not going to deny it.
Okay, let's let it roll. Let's see what else.
He gets to get priority on air, which, in that context, that he's an immigration attorney and he has very direct, relevant things to say. That makes sense. But you're not the Majority Report. You don't know him. My other issue.
Well, pause it for 1 second. Now, Ronald Reagan. To be fair, hold on. To be fair, Ronald Reagan, you could be confused that it's not the Majority Report because of the background. That's the whole point, right?
Exactly.
So you could be calling it to Pakman's show, presume it's this show because of the background.
He's got the robot voice. He's using the same phone thing.
Yeah. All right. Continue.
Same background.
And again, I'll keep this brief because the whole thing is kind of silly and I don't want to give it too much weight.
Jesus.
My other thing is, it would be one thing if you were saying, I'm not going to do my show today unless I get, 10 new members and da-da-da.
There's an idea.
It's a live stream.
All right. Is part 2 more
so
more
far,
compelling?
David has not corrected the record.
What is part 2? Oh, Brendan's gone. All right. Well, I don't know that we need to do part 2. All I can tell you is that we will have a conference, and we'll talk about this. How much do you think I could get by suing him?
Well, you look at it. Okay, so obviously when you sue someone, you got to look at who you're suing to see, what kind of money they got, and also what the actual damages are. You don't get to just sue a homeless guy and get a bunch of money, right? You know this.
I'm not sure.
Take a look at a super chat. You want an idea how much money we're going to get?
Yeah.
That money is yours, Sam. But I want to say, people are accusing me of trying to start some shit, and that's not what I'm about. But I do want to say something about the Pod Save set.
Right.
Real quick. These guys also have panels, but it's not inspired by your design. It's just a really shitty painting. And these guys, from what I understand, are making a lot of money. And they bought an old painting at Goodwill and chopped it into 3 pieces. And it's of the Capitol and a big flag. and it's the dumbest looking set I've ever seen. They would be better just doing like the basement YouTube guy thing, just in front of a wall,
right?
Than whatever it is they've got going on. And so I think that the fact that you're being copied is a sign that on the left there's a real lack of creativity, as evidenced both by David Pakman copying you and by these PodSave people who
maybe I got to change my
know what's going on over there.
Maybe I got to change my backdrop again, and then in the as my attorney, could I get Pakman to pay me to do it? Because if I've got to change it to
yeah,
All
I
right.
think that's definitely a thing.
Appreciate it.
According to the law. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you. There you go. Ronald Reagan.
Matter with
Appreciate the
this country?
call.
Just the total humor illiteracy is terrifying.
What, the caller calling?
Unless that was Raygun with a voice modulator.
I'm sure.
All right, this
Come
is.
on.
No, I'd prefer to think it was a really dumb caller.
Here is Donald Trump who has welcomed to the White House a full-on fascist. Let's listen. Go to the Fox News clip. We're going to have to get to some of these other clips tomorrow, but let's go to the Fox News clip where Bolsonaro, who has had no bones of being virulently anti-LGBT, right? I mean, like, I don't even know
everything. But I mean, if you want to go on the list, yes, I'd prefer my son be dead than gay is a sample quote.
Right. Here is him on Fox News with Shannon Bream. And just imagine, like, the idea of any other world leader. Well, basically what this is indicative of is Donald Trump loves this guy. And if Trump loves him, then Fox News folks are going to love him.
Ask you about something you retweeted during Carnival that was sexual in nature. Why did you retweet it and the comment that you made?
This video was circulating on the web already, and we
Pause
just shared it.
Sexual in nature, it was a guy urinating on another guy, right?
Yeah.
Could have been sexual. Could have been just for fun.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. But the way that they're introducing this is as if, like, we're going to put up the excuse for your, we're going to present this in such a way as we're not going to talk about your virulent homophobia over the years. What we're going to talk about is a video of a guy peeing on another guy at Carnival as a way of, in some ways, basically justifying your homophobia. As
by
if
the way,
your homophobia was not was a function of just seeing this video.
And it isn't just rhetoric. One of his first moves, along with taking the Amazon under protection, was removing protections for LGBTQ people from the books. And Brazil's formerly first gay member of the Congress fled the country under death threats.
Not to mention the murdered activist Marielle Franco was a queer.
This video was circulating on the web already, and we just shared it to try to showcase how way off the track Carnival is going in Brazil.
Did you think it would generate so much controversy?
Well, not really. I have always acted that way. Also, one of the things that got me elected as president was my sense of respect to families, principles, traditions, and customs. And of course, respect towards our culture, as well as our religion. I am a Christian. I cannot become president, totally change my way of living and doing things, which happens to be very common in the political circles.
Yes, let me nod my head. I mean, so this is the way that the right is very good at whitewashing this stuff. They will bring up a controversial topic and they will just be so satisfied with the response. And so if you're a Fox viewer, you're watching that clip, it's like, I don't blame him for being no wonder there is a problem.
It's the look what you made me do.
Exactly.
Yeah, those gays have gone too far.
Exactly. And Fox News providing that
and there's
soft
a broader
landing.
Politics that Carnival, I mean, historically, of course, but even just literally, the previous Carnival had It was won by a team that represented, Afro-Indigenous people, if I recall correctly. A lot of the teams were organized around freeing Lula. There was giant posters memorializing Marielle. So it was a whole site of resistance to this regime.
Here is which clip is which here? We should do 8. Okay, here is Bolsonaro defending his anti-LGBT administration and couching it in the same terms that we've heard the Republican Party couch it in for years.
Brazil and the United States stand side by side in their efforts to ensure liberties and respect to traditional family lifestyles, respect to God, our Creator, against the gender ideology or the politically correct attitudes, and against fake news.
Excuse me? The United
Trump
States...
smirk?
Right.
Did you see that?
Yeah. So when folks like Dave Rubin say he's really good about the SJWs, we now have a full-on fascist sitting there next to Donald Trump doing exactly what a fascist like this wants. I am just like the United States. Here's the proof. The President of the United States, I'm going to say it in front of the President of the United States, and he's just going to sit there and smile and be okay with it. We play it back again to understand what Donald Trump has just accepted from Bolsonaro as to what we as a country stand for.
Brazil and the United States stand side by side in their efforts to ensure liberties and respect to traditional family lifestyles, respect to God, our Creator, against the gender ideology or the politically correct attitudes, and against fake news.
The United States stands against this gender ideology in God's eyes. Nothing
menacing about that.
And I also just got to, he also said fake news that got the Trump smirk.
Right.
Because let's be clear, like Trump obviously is totally happy to completely destroy transgender and, queer people, but he doesn't care. But his personal narcissism, his ears perk up at this fake news thing. And a major part of his campaign, Bolsonaro's campaign, was a slush fund that was not investigated. It was tabled by the Supreme Court that spread aggressive fake news through WhatsApp groups until basically Facebook actually pulled the plug on it in the last couple weeks of the campaign. And this is one of the only cases that we can look at. And I'm not saying I don't know. Maybe the fake news did have a role in 2016, but we can actually correlate the numbers slightly tightening up with these WhatsApp groups getting shut down. So, he's nodding along with that. And Bannon is there advising Bolsonaro as well. And in fact, actual fake news was a part of a broad scale, and let's be clear, broadly U.S.-backed campaign to get this guy elected, because in addition to all of these assaults on rights of LGBTQ, it's a complete assault on labor unions and indigenous people on behalf of Western companies.
Lastly, we probably should play 7, right? Is that the? I don't want to play too many more of these.
Let's one is 7?
This is Bolsonaro. And look, it's. I don't think there's much of a coincidence where we have the United States policy shared by other countries, to be fair, but certainly far more aggressive on the United States side to undermine Maduro and to promote the presidency of Guaido. Here is Bolsonaro addressing the question of military intervention in Venezuela.
Well, there are a few issues that if you speak, they're no longer strategic. Therefore, these reserved issues, which may be discussed if they have not yet, will not become public, evidently. I remember...
You recall, this was Donald Trump's line during the campaign. Right? I can't tell you what I'm going to do because we have a secret plan, like Nixon on some level. We have a secret plan, and we can't tell you because then we would be giving away our strategy. I mean, it's not a coincidence. We're seeing the same construction of these talking
where
points.
Fascists rationalize keeping a democratic people in the dark.
And the dynamic. I mean, I guess there's a few more seconds left, but the dynamic is really disturbing because on one hand, Bolsonaro has done everything. Like there's new bases going up. There's even talk of Brazil joining NATO, which doesn't make any geographic sense, but that was on their agenda. And
they're not in the North Atlantic?
I mean, and so actually, no, maybe. I mean,
I'm being facetious.
I was going to say what? There is. Sorry. Oh, yeah. So the reason, though, that the Brazilian military has actually been really cool on this because they don't have the capacity to take on Venezuela. And they know that if there's some catastrophe across the hemisphere, they'll actually deal with it, not us. And so it's very revealing, though, that Bolsonaro went to CIA headquarters with his justice minister, the same guy who put Lula in jail. That's a very unusual meeting sequence. And the reporting that I've seen is definitely like one of those kind of splits of the military and, you know, the vice president and other horrible figures from a domestic point of view who are mainly willing to be totally subservient to the United States. They see the immense logistical challenges of doing something in Venezuela. Bolsonaro, who is an idiot and has like an astrology fascist advisor in Virginia, look that guy up. He's interested in, you know, basically doing whatever it takes to please Trump specifically. I don't even think just the United States.
Continue.
Will not become public, evidently. I remember on a debate here in the United States when a candidate asked another candidate what he would do to fight the Islamic State. He said, if I say I will no longer be able to beat it. So it's a matter of strategy. For everything that we discuss here will be honored, but unfortunately certain pieces of information, if are to come to the table, may not be debated publicly.
There is such a codependent relationship here between these two, and we are not only was Donald Trump an invitation to the Brazilian electorate to elect someone like him, and an invitation to the Brazilian elite to say, well, you know, we can get away with this, but also his presence is midwifing a lot of this and laundering a lot of this horridness. All right, we're running out of time. I'm not going to have any time for any more calls at the moment, and we'll get to that Cernovich thing. That's sort of evergreen on some level. We don't need that today. Let's do one more Jamie Dimon thing here. This is there's nothing better than listening to a banker who was in part responsible for the massive financial crisis that left millions unemployed, that cost millions of people their homes, that cost people untold amounts in their pensions. Just the sheer amount of human suffering that can be tied back to some of these guys' decisions is pretty impressive. Not we're going to start an invasion and an occupation level, but pretty significant. Here is a one-on-one with J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon.
A lot of these folks have to describe what they mean more. You're not going to get away with just saying socialism. You have to say what that means.
Pause
how you're going to effectuate
it. Here is Jamie Dimon claiming to say that the real trouble that someone who's just saying socialism is going to have is that they're not enumerating their policies, when the reality is the people saying socialism are the people who are responding to the enumeration of the policies, right? Yeah, I mean, like Bernie Sanders is describing himself as a democratic socialist. AOC describes herself as a democratic socialist. That comes only when people demand to know what their identity is after them laying out rather detailed proposals. Elizabeth Warren as well, for that matter. Rather detailed proposals that other people characterize as socialism, as opposed to, say, like Social Security or Medicare, which could also be characterized as socialism, or at least in the same manner. So here's Jamie Dimon pretending that people are just coming out saying we're providing you with a basket with goodies, but they're not telling us what the goodies actually are. When in fact, what's going on is people are coming out specifically addressing what the goodies are, and then they're being maligned as just being, well, some type of like unicorn word. But here's Jamie Dimon, who is pretending that he knows what he's talking about.
You're not going to get away with just saying socialism. You have to say what that means. How are you going to effectuate it? How is it good for the average American?
The Green New Deal, Larry Kudlow, the president's chief economic advisor a few weeks ago, said it will literally destroy the economy. Is he right?
I don't spend much time worrying about things that I can't effectuate.
Pause it. I got news for you, folks. Guess what Jamie Dimon can effectuate? Destroying the economy. I think if past performance is any type of exemplar of future performance.
He's not worried about destroying the economy because he knows he's going to be fine.
He's bet the other way. Good.
Is he right?
I don't spend much time worrying about things that I can't effectuate. Can you focus on climate change in an intelligent way that doesn't damage the economy? Mm-hmm. Yes, you can. It's called CO2 emission taxes or trading. There are a couple ways to do it.
So wait a second. There's nothing called CO2 trading emissions taxes. Couple ways to do it. I mean, here he is making the case that you can do something as if he is some type of expert and can't even name cap and trade. I mean,
you don't even have the name of your preferred policy.
The idea that this businessman who was a pillar of the failure of the U.S. economy that caused all of this widespread suffering is now his opinion is important on something that he can't even name. There are junior high students who know what that word is, what cap and trade is, and he's just like, it's all just a jumbled mess. I don't know, the environment stuff.
He's too busy remembering the word effectuate.
Yeah, recycle, folks, recycle. All right, we got to take, let's do some IMs and then we got to get out of here. Problematic norm. When Jenna Bush turned 18, The Onion ran a headline titled Federally Protected Wetlands Now Open for Drilling. I bring that up to say this. With all the talk of Chelsea, Don Jr., and the original tweeting cow, Meghan McCain, let's give credit where credit's due. The Bush daughters keep the F quiet.
Word.
Bullprog.
It took a little while to get to there,
That's
but
a good
agree
point,
with that
actually.
part.
That's a super good point.
Bullprog. Anybody else have a conservative family sending them info on Andrew Yang?
No.
I love Sarah Palin.
Yeah, tell me about Tulsi.
I love Sarah Palin. My God, Sam, reparations for slavery. Next, you're going to bring up Jim Crow, the rise of white identity organizations to terrorize black people, efforts to keep black people out of certain universities, changing how we fund schools, redlining disparities in the GI Bill, discrimination that kept black people from fully benefiting from Social Security, COINTELPRO, or things I'm certain we will learn in the future about government's full relationship with Nicaraguan cocaine traffickers like Danielo Blandon and Manuel Noriega during its war on drugs disproportionately on black people. Since all real estate is the most prominent investment people have that generates things like generational wealth, the old rule of thumb was black people moving in leads to home prices dropping and subsequent white flight. I think it's important to mention every time the subject of reparations is brought up that the current president of the United States was guilty of this exact shit. Also, Sirius, you've been talking about antitrust for the past few days. Could you have someone on to explain how we got ideas like consider the cost of regulation to implement, and it's not a monopoly unless it hurts consumers? To my knowledge, it started with Justice Powell in the 70s. Well, we've had guests on. Go back and look at Lena. Gosh, I can't remember her name. But also, oh, shoot. I can't remember all the names. I mean, Stoller and
the Haley Sweetland Edwards wrote about this.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's we had a lot of people on from the open markets. Was it? Oh, shoot, not open markets. I can't remember. I'm really having trouble with names these days. I'm not exactly sure what's going on. I haven't sent up an episode, but when we get it tagged. But yes, we'll have some antitrust people on soon. Colin from Nebraska. For those who have seen the photos of the devastation affecting my home state and others who want to should look up how to help those affected by flooding in Nebraska and Iowa in the Omaha World Herald, where links to various organizations Lena Khan. Also, F. Pence and Sass for the hypocrisy of white state like Nebraska and non-white state and non-state like Puerto Rico in times of desperation. Trump change. Biden voice. Barack Obama's a friend of mine. We served together in the White House. He's an articulate black man. Congressman O'Rourke, you're no Barack Obama. Gregory from Oklahoma. Shout out to Jamie for being the most amazing person on the Majority Report and liking my tweets. You're the best.
Thank you.
Jimmy Dore. Should we build a coalition with Devin Nunes to end Twitter war? Lavojado Gabbard 2020. Angel, I just watched the HBO documentary about Elizabeth Holmes. Have you heard of her fraud case involving mini lab machines for blood tests? Yeah, this is Theranos, right? Yeah, we've talked about that in the past a little bit. Train Boy, I have received intelligence that claims Beto's first day fundraising haul was provided by a team of Russian oligarchs. West Coast Comrade, I think Beto
Mr. Olukpeski and all the rest of you that do this work at Gazprom, I am so inspired.
Calm, cool, calculated political world salad. Oh, yeah, Egg McConnell. David Booty's Port. Arabs have taken over. Makes me feel pretty good. Doc Naps. Hey, I'm our crew. Does Bernie's loan forgiveness policy apply to graduate students? I recently graduated med school, just shy of $500,000 in loan. Oy. I don't know about that. Congressional baseball fan. Many liberals confuse the difference between legal and just. Actions can be legal but totally unjust, or conversely illegal but fully just. Just to be clear, throwing eggs at Nazis is about as violent as a game of baseball. Sure, some people could get hurt if they're hit by a pitch or two, but maybe they deserved it for standing in the strike zone. Play ball. Homer
That's
3
a sports
dude.
metaphor I can get behind.
Sam, you should know, having young kids that cows can type, you have to read them in the lives, child biography, click, clack, moo, cows that type. All right, 3 more. I must have bumped my head. Why is Becky Bond working with Beto? Not 100% sure about that. It's a good question. Contagious Chameleon. Someone please go off on the tech libertarian Andrew Yang. Maybe we will. Crazy liberal. Gallup poll shows around 2012 the Republican-leaning support for ending Electoral College started to decline. Could this be due to voter suppression? Some states proposing to make EC proportional after 2011. And the final I am of the day. PDX'd. Dude, the interview yesterday was stellar. I got a little weepy. Good stuff. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive.